Hello there, welcome to the channel. So today we're covering this topic on why it's taking Greece such a long time to recover and what are the obstacles that Greece is facing in its road to recovery at the moment. And it looks almost impossible when you consider that a good chunk of Greek people or young people from Greece are actually emigrating or leaving the country. And these are the people who are supposed to be building the country. And on top of that, there's also the whole decline on birth rates, all that mix. But there's other things as well, which unfortunately, we can't just say that's the reason. There's also other things which have led or caused this situation, you get? Because it's not like people just sit down and they say, I'm not going to have kids or screw this, I'm going to leave. There has to be a catalyst. So nobody wants to just leave home. No, it's home at the end of the day. So what could be the issues? What are the reasons? And this is just a conversation, just in case. So FYI, a lot of the things I will say or whatever it is that I'm actually going to say are merely going to be my opinions. And if I need to cite any kind of sources, I will do so and also pin them in the description section. But in general, just take whatever it is that I say with a grain of salt. Like, could be just my own opinion, could be talking out of my neck. That's just, this is what we do here. So just to let you know. And if you have any comments or you have any discomforts or anything, just let me know in the comment section. Let's continue.
Living in Greece is harder than you think. In 2017, buying a home in Athens would set you back around 1,300 euros per square metre. Today, that price has nearly doubled to 2,500, a staggering 88% increase in less than a decade.
Have the salaries doubled too? I don't think so. I used to live in the EU, and I know if there's a place where salaries do not move an inch, that's one of those places. And unfortunately, even if you upskill or do masters, your salary rarely actually moves that much. But the real estate prices and the prices for assets, considering EU is globalized and you end up having to compete with people from other countries who do not have the same, how can I put this, regulations or salary caps or abilities in general or how their salary moves, it's a little bit unfair. And this whole thing also, from what I realize, it stabilizes the market and makes Greece look like a good investment opportunity. You get like, oh yeah, if you buy assets in Greece, this is how much the prices of assets rose. Looks good on paper, as a foreigner wanting to put my money in Greece. But as a local, that's a different story.
And it's not just Athens. In 8 years since 2017, property prices nationwide have risen by nearly 70%, faster than almost anywhere else in Europe. But wages haven't kept pace. The average salary has barely moved in years, and in real terms, many Greeks are earning less than they did before the 2008 crisis. This is more than just a housing problem. There is a cost of living crisis, a rental crisis, and now even an immigration crisis. Though not in the way you might think, because the real pressure isn't coming from asylum seekers or refugees. It's coming from tourists, digital nomads, and wealthy foreign investors. Today, tourism fuels over a quarter of Greece's entire GDP.
They don't have the same issues as far as income is concerned. Let's say a good example, let's say for the digital nomads who normally tend to be tech workers. So you'll find somebody working remotely making like almost $200,000. You put even 50 of those people in a Greek village and they will absolutely destroy. And not in the meaning of, yeah, they will bring a lot of business, but in general, they might, they could actually realize, hey, we could buy that, and we could buy that. And they will have enough money to be able to have enough clout to actually, how can I say, talk to the mayor. And of course, one of the things about most municipal counties in everywhere around the world is to make sure that your town or whatever city that you're in is ripe for investments. Because at the end of the day, there's something called profit and there's something called return on investments. So this is actually a systemic issue that maybe they have a solution here.
And nearly 2 million Greeks, a fifth of the population, earn their living from it. But in Athens, short-term rentals like Airbnb have exploded, outnumbering local homes and driving up local rents in the process. Why rent to a Greek family for 500 euros a month when you could make the same in a week from a tourist. Entire neighbourhoods have been reshaped, and with over 1 million short-term rentals nationwide, it's no longer just a city issue. In some areas, as many as 1 in 5 homes are either vacant, investor-owned, or reserved for tourists. Locals are either being priced out, pushed out, or forced into tiny apartments far from where they work. Many have had enough, and protests are becoming a common sight, and others simply haven't waited. Since 2009, more than 500,000 young, educated Greeks, doctors, engineers, teachers, have left the country entirely. But this problem runs deeper than housing.
I mean, because if you're seeing your people the same age as you coming in with money from elsewhere and are able to disrupt your economy in that way, or in that shape, I mean, I don't know. It behooves me not to actually go out there and actually look for where this money is coming from. And if, let's say, you're working in the tourism industry and you're seeing a lot of Americans coming or digital nomads, and you find out this is the industry that they work. These are the industries that they work in. I mean, as a young person, that's immaculate information. And guess what? You will act on it, and you find out how to be able to get there. And you do that, and others do that, and a bunch of others do that, and millions of others do that, and it becomes another problem in itself.
Because the crisis is just one piece of a bigger picture. A slow-burning shift that threatens to redefine what it means to live, work, and belong in Greece. So how did it get to this point? And can anything be done to fix it? This is how living in Greece became impossible. It may seem like we're talking about this problem everywhere in Europe, but in Greece it's particularly acute because of another issue, which they...
This is not a Europe problem, I can tell you. Most African countries are going through this. And also, if you go to South America, it's the same. And I would say the reason why there's a focus on Europe at this point, in this segment, is because this was not the norm historically. For other countries, it can be said, you guys always had problems historically. But that's not the case. So here, there's a problem where we want to aggrandize Europe in that Europe has been a thriving place, and all of a sudden things are just going down in the gutter. And to be honest, I don't think so. I think Europe was just a ticking time bomb for some time. And the unraveling is just beginning. Even way before migrants came in, long time. I do think, from my perspective, I think countries like Greece should not have joined the EU. Because Greece joining the EU, when you're being put together with entities which, how can I put this? Had a good, I would say, I will bring the colonial history. Like, let's say Germany had colonies, Britain had a lot of colonies, Netherlands, Belgium, and all the like. So all these countries managed to build industries, massive industries out of this time period and also out of this situation. Greece didn't have a colony. I wouldn't be shocked that a lot of the industries in Greece they were basically very localized, serving the local people and offering services to the local people. So that meant the Greek system was not that expansionist in general. And now you joined your economy with other countries around you which actually were expansionist and had already established entities, like very powerful ones. So the moment you guys came in, guess what? They ate Greece up. Quick. That's how I look at it. They ate you guys up. And now after EU is eating you up, guess what? Now America or the rest of the world you're just now open for everyone's picking. And you can't do anything about it. If you decide to isolate yourself, it even becomes worse. Anyway, let's continue with this thing. That's just my take.
They became somewhat famous for debt. To understand how the modern day living crisis took shape, we need to quickly go back in time. In the 1970s, Greece had just emerged from a military dictatorship, and the new democratic government was eager to prove that prosperity was finally within reach. To do this, they spent big. Highways were built, hospitals expanded, and public sector jobs multiplied. People who had once lived through rationing could now count on a government salary or pension. It felt like progress, but there was a catch. Most of it wasn't paid for. Successive governments borrowed heavily to fund this vision, not just in emergencies, but as a habit. No one wanted to be the one to say stop. Public debt quickly piled up, more than tripling in the 1980s, and it just kept growing. At first, it didn't seem urgent. Economic growth was still steady, and besides, everyone else seemed to be doing it too. The UK, Italy, Belgium, they were
all countries with former colonies. They ate you up, man. It's one of those cases where I think Greece should have, and I think that's actually a mistake that maybe the subsequent leaders or the leaders at this time in the 70s actually made, was looking at other Europeans and pretty much putting themselves in the same boat. Since they're borrowing, we can borrow. And not knowing that maybe some of these countries also leverage their assets internationally, which Greece didn't have, because Greece didn't have any colonial ambitions, which is actually commendable that they're able to do that. Now, the problem is you're dealing with a beast that you don't know, and that's the people around you. And a lot of the institutions that you're borrowing from were created by the same people you think you're in the same boat with.
Just as much as Greece was, but not all debts are equal. And unlike their neighbours, many businesses in Greece operated solely on cash. Tax evasion was easy, and it was rampant in the system. At the same time, wealthy Greeks often found loopholes to avoid taxes altogether, and what the government gave, it couldn't always replace. By the time Greece was prepared to join the Eurozone in the late 1990s, their debt had reached 97% of GDP. While today that may seem somewhat normal.
And I'd say whoever was lending Greece money, that means the IMF, knew this. And your neighbors knew this. This is my take. With the little is that Greece was basically being fattened up for slaughter. And I haven't watched this video, but it might prove my point. I don't know. Let's continue.
Normal. In comparison, other healthy economies at the time, like the UK and Japan, were running on only 50 and 60% respectively. This level of debt is incredibly risky for any nation, but for one overspending and under-collecting, it was a ticking time bomb. But Greece stubbornly pushed forward, and in 2001, the country officially adopted the euro. For a while, access to cheap credit in the Eurozone completely masked the underlying issue of overspending. Interest rates stayed low.
Yeah, I mean, pig has to be fattened, man.
The money kept flowing, and so Greece kept borrowing. But then came 2008, the global financial crisis. After the US market crashed, investors worldwide began to panic, and everyone started pulling back their money from abroad. For a country dependent on borrowing, it was catastrophic. Suddenly, no one wanted to lend to Greece, and borrowing became nearly impossible. The reserves quickly ran dry, and they were out of money. Despite this, there was an even bigger problem. In the past, a country in a debt crisis could quickly devalue its currency to boost exports, or simply print more money to pay it back. But Greece had just joined the euro. It couldn't print more money, and it couldn't devalue its currency. It had no way out. The numbers were staggering. From 2009 to 2014, the economy shrank by more than 25%. That's not just a recession, that's a complete economic shutdown. And to this day, Greece's GDP still hasn't returned to pre-crisis levels. The unemployment rate shot to nearly 30%, and families who once felt secure saw their pensions cut, wages slashed, and public services crumble. By the spring of 2010, Greece was forced to accept its first bailout, a €110 billion package from the EU and the IMF. But that life...
Same mofos who were giving you the money from before. Only now you have the EU as well. Now it's like this mofo shape-shifted into two now. It was one, but now it's two who basically going to gut you out.
Lifeline came with brutal terms. Greece had to do whatever it took to pay back their debt. 1 in 4 public workers were fired, while those who remained faced pay cuts of up to 30%.
The slaughter has begun. The slaughter had begun.
The public healthcare budget was slashed by 25% overnight, leaving thousands of sick Greeks without access to treatment. At the same time, taxes kept rising and rising, but that still wasn't enough. Greece needed to find more money.
I remember being on holiday in Crete, and I was very shocked that the Greek sales tax was 23%, and things were actually not that expensive. Things were not that costly. Well, for me, considering I come from outside. And I was asking myself, like, what does the shopkeeper keep? What is left for it to make sense for them to even have this business? And I do think it's one of the few reasons why tourism is such a big thing. And a lot of the assets which are tourism based, I don't think they're actually even owned by locals. Because as a local, number one, you're thinking most of that money or most of your investment into assets, if it's not a case where you're like old money, if it's new money, that means you have to, let's say you're going to use credit or you're going to borrow to be able to make investments, let's say for an Airbnb based house or something like that. So you're thinking in terms of, first of all, the terms as we've already seen here, they actually have a lot of stringent policies, and I think the interest rate is also higher. Let me find out. And with more stringent, they're going to have to borrow with a lot of stringent regulations. Then there's also regulations from the government and from the EU as well. And one thing I know about the EU is these guys are good at rules. These guys are experts at bureaucracy. Then having to deal with all of that, and after dealing with all of that, 23% of your sales tax that you have to forward it to the consumer, and the consumer has to make money from, let's say, employment, which is not there. So that means the tourist is the one who's paying for that 23%. And then you have to pay back your interest, and let's say you have employees and also fixtures and repairs for your assets. And there's corporate tax as well. How much is the corporate tax? Yeah, there's corporate tax as well. I don't think you're left with that much to even make sense, and hence why young people choose to go elsewhere or take their skills elsewhere.
And fast. In desperation, the government turned to their last resort, privatising public assets. Airports, oil refineries, water...
Yes, slaughter. Absolute slaughter. Same people who were fattening you in the 70s. Absolute, it's a long game. I'm talking like this because coming from Africa, we've seen this. We see this. For you guys, at least it's like 20-year period. For us, it's like, in Africa, it's like 7, 5, 10. You just see it like, okay, these guys are like, this and this was happening, roads were built, then all of a sudden you hear cement factories being sold or ownership changing. Just things are happening and you realize, oh, shit, they're paying back debts. We got fattened, now it's time for slaughter. And here's the people who are making these calls, or the kids of the people who are making these calls, are not going through this slaughter. They're probably elsewhere. They're probably outside. And probably they operate in Greece like way better than tourists. That's the most insane thing, or the most interesting part. The people who actually sunk the country into this problem are not the guys who actually pay. It's the public.
Even the national power grid, the country's most valuable infrastructures, were being sold off. The port of Piraeus.
And you know what's the most interesting part? I wouldn't be shocked that a lot of these privatizations...
Privatizing public assets. Airports.
Most of these privatizations, most of the people who are making the calls, or who are doing the whole taking in the money and not collecting taxes properly from their friends or from themselves in the 70s and in the 70s, 80s up to now, they're probably using that money which was supposed to be paid in taxes during that time. They're using it to actually buy a percentage of, let's say, these privatized assets. So maybe Lufthansa will own this airport, or let's say a Chinese company is going to own this airport, probably 80%. You'll find this person is going to own, let's say, 5%. And they're going to diversify, you know. They're not just going to put their money in the airport. As the country is being gutted, they're going to distribute the investments and diversify, you know. Because at the end of the day, they look at Greece as a risky investment, even though they themselves are the cause for that reason.
Oil refineries, waterworks, even the national power grid, the country's most valuable infrastructures, were being sold off. The port of Piraeus, one of the busiest in the Mediterranean, was handed over to a Chinese firm. Airports were leased to a German conglomerate, and the national power grid, a controlling stake, was sold to foreign investors. For ordinary Greeks, the message was clear. The country might still be called Greece, but it no longer felt like it belonged to them. To recover, Greece leaned into the only sector it had left, tourism. With over 6,000 islands and a coastline.
It's pretty much the last resort, and rightfully so, as it's called resort. It's the last resort. Most countries you'll find that go through this tend to end up in relying on tourism. And it's insane because your whole economy is based on foreigners. It's based on making foreigners comfortable. And the reason why I say the whole economy, I mean, you have the airports owned by the Germans, you have the electricity and the ports being owned by the Chinese, who are all foreigners, and drawing pretty much, they have to be comfortable. And now you're in tourism, making the other foreigners or other foreign people comfortable.
Stretching nearly 14,000 kilometers, Greece has consistently ranked as one of the most beautiful countries in the world. And they went all in, upgrading their hotels, simplifying the visa process, and advertising the islands. At first, it worked. In 2009, fewer than 20 million people visited Greece, but that number quickly grew. By 2024, a record 41 million people poured into the country for tourism, an astonishing 200% increase. They brought
And let me guess, now the big foreigners again, and the guys who took over the power grid, and there's the Germans who took over the airport, and the Chinese who took over the power grid. Guess what? Where they come from, they also have hotel conglomerates as well, just on the same level. And when they look at this, they're like, there's a fat pig there's something nice here for slaughter. And of course, they're gonna come. I'm assuming this is where we're going.
Cameras, wallets, and 22 billion euros worth of spending. Tourism now fuels over a quarter of Greece's entire GDP, and nearly 2 million Greeks earn their living from it. At the time, it seemed like the perfect remedy. On the news, sandy beaches and cruise ships replaced budget cuts and protests. And to the Greeks, it felt like hope had returned. But although tourism did create jobs, most of them were low-paying and seasonal. The average tourism worker earns only 1,100 euros a month, barely above minimum wage, while the average cost of living in a city sits at nearly 2,000 euros. Meanwhile, neighbourhoods began to shift. Places once home to teachers and shopkeepers were being transformed into hotels and short-term rentals. In Athens, working-class districts like Siri and Koukaki were overturned. Long-term renters were evicted, and landlords realised they could earn a year's rent in just a few weeks on Airbnb. Then in 2013, Greece decided to double down and introduced the Golden Visa program. Spend 250,000 euros on property and you'd get a 5-year residency. On paper, it sounded smart. Attract foreign investment and rebuild the economy. And attract foreign investment it did. Over the past decade, the program has brought in over 5.5 billion euros into the country's real estate market. It seemed like a blessing, like Greece had found a way out of their crisis. But beneath the surface lies a dangerous trade-off with permanent consequences. Most foreign investors didn't buy these houses to live in. They bought it for the visa and to make profit. Out of the 16,000 properties bought under the scheme, an astonishing 94% were repurposed into rentals. This shift meant that all the rental income from these properties was now flowing abroad. Year by year, profits that once circulated within Greece were now leaving the economy, and they weren't coming back. The money that could have been reinvested into local communities was instead being fed to investors thousands of miles away.
And if you ask me, there's nothing as, sorry to put this, you know what, I'm not even apologizing. There's nothing as useless as an industry as real estate. Because real estate rarely actually gives any kind of employment. Like I could have this, other than, I don't know, repairs and the likes, but real estate, I don't look at real estate as a steady employment. Once the house is built and the repairs, and on top of that, considering most municipal councils or most governments will actually have like a limit as to how many houses are built. So it's not something that's continuous and that can need some form of like a manufacturing process. Like it's rarely value adding. Most of the money that comes into real estate is very speculative. And it doesn't help that Greece is also in the EU, so that means a lot of the money that's leaving doesn't even stay in the EU as well, because most of these houses are also owned by not only individuals, but whole companies, whole hotel entities.
This was just the beginning. Things were about to get much worse. Thousands of homes were pulled from the market and converted into short-term tourist rentals. Entire apartment blocks gutted, renovated and listed on Airbnb. In some neighbourhoods, it became nearly impossible to find a lease that lasted more than a month. With houses constantly being taken out of circulation, supply became increasingly tight, and the pressure on the remaining housing stock exploded. The buyers were not couples or local families, but instead foreign millionaires, international real estate funds and visa hunters with deep pockets. They weren't just buying property, they were buying leverage, and they were willing to pay for more than anything an ordinary Greek ever could.
And I think once you buy a real estate, if I'm not wrong, after a couple of years, you also are eligible for a Greek passport. That means an EU passport.
Demand spiked and prices surged. Between 2017 and today, residential property prices in central Athens have increased by over 88%. Rent has spiraled out of control, and for the average Greek, the average wages didn't come close. In fact, they were even falling. Many were now spending over half their income just to keep a roof over their heads, and even then, it still wasn't enough to stay. Before anyone could react, locals found themselves being priced out of their own childhood homes. It seems that they've now had enough, and every single year thousands take to the streets, not to just protest against rising rent and falling wages, but to defend the very soul of their cities. By 2024, the backlash had grown too loud to ignore.
This is also happening in Portugal and also Spain as well. And at least, how can I put this? Greece, Portugal and Spain also a bit lucky in that the government will pay attention as we're about to see. Other parts of the world, places like Indonesia, for Bali, and let's say Africa, Cape Town, and the likes, there's nobody's gonna listen. It's capitalism 100% pure. Like, things will just continue. Like, you'll go to places where you find a whole block of houses, a certain area. It's just meant for tourists, and nobody bats an eyelid, because most of those houses are also owned by politicians in those places.
And Prime Minister Mitsotakis finally stepped in. In an attempt to fix the market, new licenses for rentals were banned in central Athens, and the minimum threshold for the golden visa was increased to €500,000 in high-demand areas.
That's not going to help. Most of the people who could afford $250,000 to do this had more in their pockets.
But these actions just came a little too late. Much of the damage has already been done.
Yeah.
Since 2009, more than 50,000 Greeks have been leaving the country each year. Many of them young, educated, and full of potential. Doctors, engineers, teachers, entrepreneurs. The very people Greece had invested in are gone. By today, over 500,000 healthy working-age Greeks have left. Those who chose to remain were forced to bear the consequences. With waves upon waves of healthy adults leaving the country, Greece's birth rate has collapsed to one of the lowest in the world, only around 1.3 children per woman, compared to...
How do you even have kids and take care of kids when you can't take care of yourself?
...to the global average of 2.27. But here's the part that not many people talk about. The crisis wasn't just caused by foreigners or tourists. Much of it was enabled, even engineered, by Greece's own political and economic elite. While millions of Greeks were tightening their belts, they saw the crisis as an opportunity to cash in. They didn't just survive the crisis, they thrived.
It's the thing I was saying. The people who engineered this, they rode that wave. Like, they had the money, which, sorry to say this was supposed to be the tax which they should have actually paid, and the money they should have actually paid back, way back when in the 70s and 80s, all that. Now, it's what they were using as, well, their money to take part in the slaughter of the economy, of their own economy and their own people.
Greece was forced to sell off national assets to meet bailout terms. These elites were the first in line. They got public contracts and were the first to be bought in on privatised infrastructure. The same companies that helped run the country into debt were now profiting from its recovery. Ports, waterworks and the power grid were all quietly snapped up by well-connected businessmen through partnerships with foreign investors. To them,
I hadn't watched this video, and I'm surprised, and I'm afraid and I'm shocked that I was actually correct. And the reason why is because this is something that plays out everywhere. It's international. It plays out everywhere. This is the game. I'm actually coming here to a conclusion that we do complain that, oh yeah, the system is messed up, it's not working. Nah, I think it's working exactly how it's supposed to be working.
Them, it was the opportunity of a lifetime, and they took it. They were making heaps of money from basic human needs. A stretch of motorway in Athens infamously cost Greece 3 times more than to build a similar one in France, a country with double their minimum wage. The money clearly wasn't going to the workers, but in Greece that was just business as usual. And while all of this was happening, everyday wages persistently declined. Even in 2024, the minimum wage was just €830 a month before taxes. Rent alone takes up more than half of that. The truth stings. In Greece today, many tourists live better than the citizens themselves. In buzzing downtown Athens, upscale hotel rooms and luxury Airbnbs sit empty most of the year, yet demand keeps them spruced and staffed. Meanwhile, Greek families crowd into half-finished basements or split small apartments on the city's edge, scraping to make rent. Greece's story today serves as a reminder of how an entire country can crumble under its own irresponsible economic policies.
I wouldn't say it's Greece's irresponsible economic policies. I would say it's just having a really messed up elite. My theory is it's a bit wild. Greece didn't have colonies, so their elite didn't have, how can I say, other nations or other places to gut down. That's why their elite pretty much gutted them. The other countries, Belgium, UK, Germany, France, they had other places to go gut down, or pretty much they could pass their problems, or they could do certain things using other economies. They were able to do that. And even if, let's say, a good example place, a place like Germany, which did have colonial assets, and they were taken after losing the World War, the industrial infrastructure was still German. But that's here nor there. That's another topic. So when Greece came into this whole scenario, it was, especially in the 70s, because yes, there was time to recover and that was not possible because unfortunately the same people who pretty much were the architects of these problems were so powerful from the looting that happened in the 70s that they couldn't let the system recover, or they couldn't help the system recover, because what got them where they are was pillage, local pillage. So at no point were they to actually let things thrive. And yeah, I would say going into the EU, coming in together, and on top of that, having to deal with other countries which could, how can I put this? They didn't have to use their local population as slaves at that particular time, made a very big impact. Of course, right now things have changed in a lot of countries, but you can't negate part of it. There's a connection, and for me, it's the part where Greece pretty much took money from entities or from organizations which were built by the same people you think you're in the same boat with. It's like me coming with a boat and telling you, hey, why don't you jump in? I built the motor, I built the boat, I know how to make the boat sink and where the life vests are, but I kind of convince you to actually join in, because I mean the boat looks nice, the boat is awesome, there's nice food, things are comfortable in this boat, and of course you're gonna sail until you get to the middle sea. That's the time which you have to pay your fare, you have to pay your share. That's the time when you have zero leverage, and right now in the middle of the sea, and I think you have to pay and Greece is in a situation where they are being forced to pay their fair share, and the people who accepted the ride, they're not even in the boat, they're riding jet skis outside. Anyway, so that's my take. Be sure to check out my other videos. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you think I'm talking any kind of sense, let me know in the comments.